One day, I was writing at my desk and my pen ran out of ink. So who would have thought that something as mundane as that would have changed my life forever? I got up to look for another pen and I was walking into my partner's music room and I wasn't paying attention. I was just thinking about my writing. It was how that is. You just sort of caught up. And all of a sudden I heard, and it was as though someone tapped my shoulder, and shouted in my ear. That's how vivid it was. In my mind, I heard, "Look out, I'm down here." And I looked down and there was my cat, Bubby, laying on the door threshold. And I thought, did he say that? And I thought, no way. I dismissed it. It happened again 2 months later when I was petting him. I got a real quick image. And all these things are really important because this is how we operate in our normal lives, receiving images in our mind, which are our thoughts, and hearing our thoughts. And animal communication is no different. It's just becoming aware.
Welcome to On Mute with Priya, the podcast where silence ends, voices rise, and women rediscover the freedom to speak and live authentically, especially in life after 40. This show is proudly sponsored by Project Icon. I'm your host, Priya Sudarsanam. Let's dive into today's conversation. Today on Mute with Priya, I'm talking with Diana Del Monte. Diana is an interspecies communicator, and she works with animals in a way that goes beyond what most of us understand as communication. Diana, I am so excited to talk with you today and share this episode with the world, because what drew me to this conversation isn't just what you do, it's about what you point to and how we've become disconnected from our own intuition, listening, and tapping into those quieter ways of knowing. So we are jamming today.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
Yes, it's amazing the work that you do. But before we even dive into this and the work that you do, is this what you've always done?
No. Oh God, no. No.
Share a little bit more about that.
I was an artist for, 30 years. And it wasn't until I moved to Los Angeles in the early 80s, my work just blossomed. And I just got right in with the art scene, and that was my life. And then fast forward, at that time, I didn't want any animals or children. I didn't want to get married. I was a prolific artist, obsessed, couldn't, 24/7, and I was very, very focused on just that. I didn't want anything else. And then one day, my partner brought home a little black cat, a little black kitten, which I wasn't very happy about. And then before I knew it, I had 4, like 6 months later, I had 4 more because they were showing up at the door. And then at that time also, I was teaching art. I was working in the galleries and museums. I was exhibiting my work, still full blossomed into my art. And I was working at a metaphysical bookstore, the Bodhi Tree bookstore, which was quite well known. So the point is, I was very open to world religions and metaphysical topics, and I was my artwork was exploring consciousness, and I was influenced by Carl Jung, and I was open to so much, but not animal communication. I thought it was ridiculous. I was skeptical. I never believed it. And a lot of people don't believe it, and that's why this is, I feel, so important, because one day I was writing at my desk and my pen ran out of ink. So who would have thought that something as mundane as that would have changed my life forever? I got up to look for another pen and I was walking into my partner's music room and I wasn't paying attention. I was just thinking about my writing. It was how that is. You just sort of caught up. And all of a sudden I heard, and it was as though someone tapped my shoulder, and shouted in my ear. That's how vivid it was. In my mind, I heard, "Look out, I'm down here." And I looked down and there was my cat, Bubby, laying on the door threshold. And I thought, did he say that? And I thought, no way. I dismissed it. It happened again 2 months later when I was petting him. I got a real quick image. And all these things are really important because this is how we operate in our normal lives, receiving images in our mind, which are our thoughts, and hearing our thoughts. And animal communication is no different. It's just becoming aware of the difference between the animal's voice and your own, because they're always communicating. But what happened at this time was I was petting Bubby, And again, I was very focused, one pointed attention, just focused on his warm fur. We were in the sun. And all of a sudden, I got a flash of an image of he going to urinate. And he had a history of urinary blockages. And I thought, is he telling me that he's having a problem? And again, I dismissed it. I was so skeptical. And then 2 days later, he had a full-on blockage, and I had to rush him to the vet.
Oh my gosh.
And then it happened again through a dream. The third time it happened, it wasn't him, it was another cat, informing me in a dream that another one needed help. Another one of my cats needed help. And he did need help. He had an abscess on his back, and it was spreading, and I hadn't noticed it. So at that point, I thought, I think my cats are talking. And that's when I looked into it more and practiced with them and began training, and my whole life changed.
My gosh, what an incredible story. What an incredible story. And as you're talking, I'm wondering, first question that was coming up for me is, do we all have this ability to listen and communicate with our animals this way?
Yeah.
Or just even tap into our intuition in this way?
Oh God, yeah. Animal communication truly is nothing more than becoming aware of the thoughts in your mind, the feelings in your body, and the images that come through your mind. And the images and the thoughts, they're so subtle because this is how natural it is. It's so natural that it's so subtle, we're not aware. For example, if you lose your car keys and you trace your steps trying to remember where you might have left them, what are you doing when you're tracing your steps? You are actually seeing in your mind's eye where you walked. So those are images, right? And maybe you might even recall hearing a clunk, oh yeah, they fell in the bathroom or whatever. This, and another example is trying to, when you think of a friend or you think of what you're going to eat for dinner, it's always an image. Thoughts are images. So when we begin to be aware of the images that are coming through, like if you were to ask an animal a question, to be aware of the images and the feelings in your body, because you can feel what they're feeling, and the thoughts, because so often you may think the thoughts are your own.
Right.
And they're not, because the thoughts don't always come in as they did when I heard Bubby in the music room. They're not always that strong, and they don't always get your attention like that. They're very, very subtle, just like the pictures in your mind when you're looking for your car keys. It's subtle. So the answer to your question is, yeah, we just need to become more aware of our natural abilities, because when we're talking to people, we are operating out of all these different senses. You can feel what the person's feeling. When they're off, even though they're saying they're feeling good. They're not telling you the truth. Right. That sort of thing, right? We're always using our intuitive, if you want to call it psychic, because that's what it is. It's beyond words. And so we're always using those abilities. It's our natural birthright. So
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I, especially working in the field of communication for 20 years, you're making me realize a lot of times when I was working with those children, like I was tapping into something within that, if they weren't speaking yet, to help them actually say their first words. So I think a lot of us, as I ask that question, have that skill, but are just so unaware that we're using it.
Well, that's a good example. Exactly. When you're a mother, how do you know what your baby wants? You're tuned in. Exactly. It's the same.
Yeah. And I think, what would you say to this? Because a lot of people take communication for granted. It's just, you think that you're just in this interaction. I'm going to say something, you're going to listen, and just back and forth. Meanwhile, there's so much involved in communication. And my perspective is, like, we've lost a lot as humans as far as listening goes. We do not listen. So what is your perspective on that?
Well, I agree. We don't listen. And because we have words and we rely on words and our intellect, and that's what's emphasized in our learning, in school, academics. I'm, by the way, sidebar, I just wrote a proposal. It's always been my dream to get animal communication in the public schools. Now, I know it's a long shot and it's ahead of its time, but you never know, because I think intuition really should be taken more seriously, and it should be developed. And when I was teaching art, and I still teach art to kids, the school doesn't know I'm doing this, but if I have time, we do animal communication, and they're quite good at it. You know, a 7-year-old boy, for example, and this is like with 20-minute instruction.
Right.
A 7-year-old boy, the question was, what was my assistant's dog's favorite thing to do? And he saw a bench in his mind's eye. He saw a bench. He saw like a park setting. He didn't know it was a park. He said, I see a bench. I see a cement path running through it, and I smell pizza. And everybody started laughing. Well, it turned out she went to the park every day with her dog. There was a cement pathway going through the park. They sat on a bench, and they passed coming and going in an Italian restaurant. So this 7-year-old boy picked this up. And so the whole point is children, as you know, are very open, more open than we are. So it's easier for them actually to learn it than it is for us, I think. Well, that's not easier, but it might even be more natural for them because they're still in that play kind of state. They don't have expectations. They're not skeptical. They're open to everything. They love animals. They're very intrigued by the thought of communicating with them. And so, so we have words, and that's kind of, works against us because there's so much more to our communication. And that's what animal communication will make you more aware of all those different levels. Because when you're communicating with an animal, you're picking up information on different levels. You know, like as I explained, it could be through the body, the feelings, it could be emotional, it could be words, thoughts in your mind, or it could be images, or it could be all of the above.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is so amazing. And you said that children often have this skill. What do you think shuts it down?
Our training. Yeah. Well, think about it. Today, we can talk about intuition. I couldn't talk about this, when I was growing up. No one really knew what that was, or no one really acknowledged it. At least I had no support. I had no support at all. And I had experiences when I was a kid. I would see things in my room, and I thought I was crazy. I spent most of my life thinking I was crazy and drinking a lot of alcohol and doing drugs to numb my imagination. And it was not my imagination. I was perceiving things that no one explained to me. So today is different. Generally speaking, I think people are more open to it. Would you have had this podcast with an animal communicator, 50 years ago? Probably not.
Probably not.
Because when I first was trained back in 2000, there were maybe a handful, maybe 20, maybe more than 20, but it was a handful, and now there's hundreds. So it's growing.
Yeah.
It's growing, but it takes a while. And so intuition needs to be taken more seriously.
Absolutely. I think so. And I think if you tap into intuition, then you just go through life more on purpose rather than just life letting things happen to you. And you actually can make better decisions and maybe sometimes make bad decisions, but know that you are going, you actually are conscious of the things that you're doing in life.
Well, now, and it's taken me a lifetime, seriously, to rely on my intuition. I hear guidance and I listen to it, and I never did that before, because when you have a hunch, that's guidance, that's your intuition, that's your inner guidance. And if you don't listen, if you don't act on your hunch, and I think it's 7 minutes, the intellect will kick in and talk you out of it. And so I, like most people, were very used to just listening to the intellect, always contradicting that first hunch that comes up. And now, the more you listen to the hunches, and the more you start to tune into your inner voice, the more prominent it becomes. So it's sort of like you have to almost be you have to kind of set your intention to start listening to it.
Yeah. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about the mirror principle in my weekly group, and how people use them as a full-length mirror to reflect back to you and ask the mirror, what is it showing you? So in your experience, do animals reflect back things to art?
God, yeah.
I love your reaction.
Yeah.
I think you just answered that. Yeah. What is it? What do they reflect back to ourselves about ourselves?
Behavior problems, for one. This is an extreme example, but the dog had separation anxiety. And it's interesting because with a behavior problem, sure, he might have not wanted her to leave, but there was more beyond the surface. And there's always layers that you peel when you're doing a behavior problem. They can be very complex, and so I wrote a book about it to show the complexity of some of my case studies. But this one dog in particular, the long story short was that the woman, and this didn't come out immediately. This came out after working with him and things weren't shifting. And then I began to look at her. And usually, you know, I look at a person's, I use the word chakras, you know, the energy centers of the body. And always what's off, if it's a mirror, what's off in the animal will be off in the person, like they're mirroring the energy centers as well. So that's kind of like a validation for me. But anyway, also with talking to the woman and just in conversation, we realized that she was suffering from, I forget my initials correct, a PSS, what is it? Post, yeah. Anyway, and she didn't realize it, but she had gone through, you know, her relationship ended, her business fell, she was broke, she had to move. I mean, she was going through all of this stuff for quite a while, and she wasn't addressing it. When she started getting therapy, the dog's behavior changed, and he stopped ripping the place apart. So that's an extreme mirror, but it happens all the time. I worked with a dog recently who was attacking the other two dogs. Yeah, you know, part of her had this mother instinct and she wanted to be the kind of the queen of the house, but it was more than that. And it turned out, talking to the woman, I mean, the clients usually end up crying. They just like get it all out, you know, with me. And the woman just, she had to give up she was grieving the loss of an animal, but also she had to give up her rescue, her sanctuary, because she just couldn't maintain it anymore. And she wasn't coming to terms with that. She just was very unsettled in her life and she wasn't expressing it. And so the dog was mirroring those emotions. And so we worked with the dog and actually, you know, sometimes I'll tell my clients, talk to your dog, talk to your animal, tell them what you're going through because they can feel it, but they don't know what it is or why. And so talk to your animal like you would your best friend. And her behavior, it was a dog, a female dog, her behavior stopped immediately. And she's not attacking the other two dogs anymore. And sometimes animals need a job. So like another animal was attacking another animal. And so I gave her the job of being the protector of the home, to protect the yard and chase away predators, not her sibling. And it worked. You know, she went out there every day. You know, one client said, please tell my animal now that they don't have to always go out. They're waking me up during the night. But I mean, they hear you. They hear you and they're so cooperative. Yeah. They want you to be happy. Yeah.
You're making me think about my dog. She's the first fur baby in family. We've never had dogs and now everybody absolutely loves her. But not having a dog, and the people that I had in my life at the time when I got her weren't really great models of how to raise a puppy. And so it took me a while to realize she's a sentient being. She's a feeling, living being just like me. Everything that is happening in my house is a result of me and what was going on internally to me. So,
oh, you knew that intuitively.
It took me a while. It took me a couple of years. And
yeah.
Actually, and she got sick. She had an autoimmune disease, and I went out of my way. I was like, I am going to do everything to get my puppy well. I don't care how much it costs, and I did. She's 2 years, almost more than 2 years in remission, whereas other owners usually have to where I've seen on Google at least, they put them down. And I realized there was a connection there, like in caring for her because I don't have children. I fell in love with her, and she taught me what true love really is. I've never felt that towards another person. Yeah, my parents, but towards her. And then once I really learned the lesson, she started getting well, and it was like, yeah.
There's a testimony right there.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I didn't have it at first because I didn't. And I think a lot of people, and even in the area that I am, there's a lot of stray dogs, and I see every single one of them, and it just breaks my heart because I could see through their eyes, and I'm just thinking, what's their story? But it's nothing would have prepared me for it other than her. It's like she came back to teach me that. Yeah.
That's why animals are in our lives, and it's no coincidence. It's not a coincidence that you ended up with her, because she had that lesson for you. And so often, everything is a soul contract, and they come in. I believe, and I've written about this too, is that before we take birth, we decide with one another, including our animals, what we want to learn. And we're all, helping each other with our learning our karmic lessons. And that was definitely, nothing is coincidental.
Yeah.
Animals in your life, they're there for a purpose and for a reason. And you're right, it's heartbreaking when an animal is urinating in the house and the person gives them up. Not only are they missing their lesson, but they're doing a disservice, to the poor animal. It's just heartbreaking.
I love that you brought up soul contracts and karmic cycles, because I think a lot of people don't realize, we understand that as it relates to humans, but it also relates to animals.
We have karma with animals, and even like with lost animals, sometimes when they're not showing up, and a lot of animals are not found. And I always have to remind, my clients that our animals have their own spiritual path. And for whatever reason, this is part of their karmic journey. And we have to, as heartbroken as we are, we have to find, that point in ourselves of acceptance and just letting, allowing the life to unfold as it will, because we have no control. And working with lost animals, I could provide tools for you to go and to search, but I cannot guarantee that your animal is going to be found. And that's one reason. There's physical reasons. They hide. They don't want to come out, even when you're calling them, or someone has them and won't give them up. I mean, there's physical reasons. But the spiritual, I say spiritual. I always use that. I throw that word around like, like candy. But, the karmic reasons, there's karmic reasons behind it too. And we have to accept that. Because we don't know. We don't know the bigger picture.
Right. So many lessons in this that you're
sharing. There are so many lessons.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about how you work with clients, and why people will even come to you.
Well,
I'm sure there's many reasons, but
yeah, well, mostly the behavior problems, which, I kind of explained. Lost animals are obvious. I did that for over 20 years. I stopped because I was overgiving. I was too much of my time. I wasn't charging enough, and I didn't want to charge more, so I just stopped doing them. My colleague said, well, you should have just raised your prices. And maybe he's right, but I don't know, I just couldn't do it. I stopped doing them. I do take them now, but I take them now, but I don't like highlight it anymore. But now I'm getting off track.
That's all right. This is what we were talking about, our brain. Embrace it.
Why do they come to me? Okay, so obviously they want to find their animal, they have a behavior problem. But also, I work a lot with animals in spirit, and that's what my forthcoming book is about, animals in the afterlife. But that is really a very rewarding service that I provide, because everybody wants to know, everyone is grieving, and we miss our animals, and we want to have that connection again. And just for people to understand that your animal is not, they're not gone, they're still communicating with you, they're leaving you signs, or they might not be. But if you ask, they may become more apparent. But what I do, is not just working with animals, because the people usually need a lot of help, like with the behavior problems, resolving their issues, or grieving for the lost animals, or the animals in spirit. So I work a lot, with people.
Let's talk about your book, because that's coming out.
Yeah, I'm really excited about my book. I have over 50 submissions of people, from government workers to veterinarians, who have had their animals return in spirit in some way. And some of this, what I put my request out for submissions on, for stories about animals who, who died and have come back. But I got a lot of stories that were either about humans, or were they weren't what I asked for, but they were great stories. So I thought, I've got to include them in the book. So those stories kind of created my book because I started making new chapters so that I can put those stories in there. So I have all these different topics with all these different kinds of stories. The stories are amazing and they're all different. And then the book just covers a lot of information, and I incorporate a lot of science-backed discovery, quantum physics, doctors weighing in, so that it gives a book some grounding, and foundation, because it's not a woo-woo subject, and I didn't want it to come across that way. So yeah, anyway, I'm very excited about.
What's the name of your book?
The name of the book is Between Worlds and Beyond: What Animals Tell Us Before and After Death. And it also includes end of life conversations I've had with animals, and because animals sometimes they have a little bucket list when they're leaving, and they have things that they don't really want very much at all, but sometimes there's things that they request.
Yeah.
One dog requested, they were going to put him down like the next day, and working with him and communicating with him, he said to me, "Where's my green ball?" It turned out they had taken the balls away because, well, the dogs fought over them, but also they didn't think that he would want to play anymore. He had cancer.
Yeah.
He was on his way out. He only, he had one leg amputated, and he wasn't eating or walking anymore. But he asked for his green ball. So then after the session, he had to go to the bathroom. So his person came in, took him outside, and the dog didn't want to come back in. And so the person got the green ball out of his truck and threw it across the lawn. The dog started chasing the ball and playing with it. And he played for 3 more weeks.
Oh my gosh.
And he started eating again. That green ball gave him energy and more will to live. And then he finally died on his own. 3 weeks later, at 3 in the morning, they didn't have to put him down. Well, there's so much, the work is very rewarding, the end of life work. And so that's in the book. And there's a lot of things.
That just seems like it would fill your soul. I think a lot of times when we're thinking about end of life, there's so much sorrow and sadness that we place onto it. But the way that you're describing it to me right now, it just sounds like it could be such a beautiful shared experience. And even if we apply this to the humans in our life as well, that we know are going to leave.
Definitely. Animals really, because I don't euthanize anymore. Not that I wouldn't. If they were truly, truly suffering, I would. But I had a bad experience once with euthanasia, and I just don't choose to do it anymore. But the point is, animals have taught me how to be present and calm during the dying process. And that's in my book too. I include the stages of dying from the Tibetan Book of the Dead, so that people who want their animals to go naturally can kind of read the stages, so they kind of understand what the body is. Just the body going through the different losing the air, and then what happens, and then they lose the fire element, and they're losing all the elements, and so you're witnessing sometimes things that may look really uncomfortable, but it's just the body. So, I had an animal that was a stray cat that came up to me in the pouring rain, who was dying. I mean, he was bad shape. He died the next day in my bathroom. But because I had no emotional attachment, I was able to sit with this cat and just be fully present. And then I started doing that with my own animals who were dying, and my dad. And it makes a big difference because they can feel your angst and your sadness. So you really want to make the experience, it's okay to cry, of course, but you want to make the experience as joyful as possible. Reminisce with them their life and their good times they had with you. They love to hear that. And give them permission to leave, because many times they'll hang on for you. So often, when a person, because they're very stoic and they won't show their pain, but as soon as a person gives them permission to leave, the very next day, this one animal that very night finally showed how much pain he was really in. He couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, moaning, whining, and then she knew it's okay, it's time to put him down. But, that did not happen until she gave him permission to leave. Wow. So all of these things are really, important when an animal is checking out.
Wow, you're just really, I'm really learning so much from you about the deep soul connection that is. I hope people listen to this and understand, if they do have a fur baby, or just even seeing that stray, that connecting with them. I do, even where I am right now, there's this stray that keeps coming and saying hi to me, and she brought her baby by to meet me, but
Oh,
nobody else in this place met the baby. And she came yesterday, and there's just, my puppy has, I call her puppy, really shown me like, hey, talk to them, and talk to them and have a conversation with them, because it's just like that human that you might see on the road who maybe doesn't have a home. Having that one conversation with them could be the thing that really lights them up and shifts things for them. So that's how I approach these little animals that I see on the street now. One question that I wanted to ask you: do you work with other, just all animals, or is it
yeah,
limited?
all animals. I've tried communicating with cockroaches actually to tell them to leave. I did not have success with that.
Yeah.
I have had success actually with flies, telling them where to go, or actually in the house what I was going to do and how I'm going to put the cup over them. I show them the whole thing in my mind and reassure them that I'm not going to hurt them. And because they're real quick, but there have been times when they've let me catch them. And so all life has a consciousness and can communicate. Trees can communicate. And just one quick little story that comes to mind was when my dad was dying, I had one request. And I said to the universe, let me be with him when he takes his last breath, because I wasn't there for my mom. I was 27, she was 54 when she died, and I could have been there, and I wasn't. And I never forgave myself for not being, I loved her, I don't know, I messed up, I was young. So anyway, he was dying, it's soon, but this one day I had to take a break. So I went to Griffith Park, which is a park in Los Angeles and kind of in the mountains, and I was hiking. And then I stopped and I saw some bees buzzing in a bush, and I love bees. And so I went underneath the bush, and they're all swarming around me. And I like their buzz. So I was just listening to their buzz, and my eyes were closed. And all of a sudden, now I don't know if it was the tree speaking, or if the bees were speaking, or if spirit was, I don't know who was speaking, but it doesn't matter, because it's all one consciousness. But I heard in my mind, again, it could have been it could have been somebody tapping my shoulder. It was so prominent in my mind. And I heard, go to your dad now. Just like that. When you hear things like this, you don't question it. I was running down that hill so quickly. I was 40 minutes away. I got into my car and I'm speeding on the freeway trying to get to him. And I got there just in time. He died like 15 minutes later. So that was guidance, and I don't know where it came from, but I've had a lot of experience, experiences with nature speaking. So it's not just animals, it's everything. Snakes, everything. Yeah, everything is alive. In quantum physics, it's science, so they can't say animals communicate, it's not proven, but they certainly know. And they state that all atoms, the atoms are connected and communicating with other atoms, always bouncing off information. An atom is split and they're still communicating, and one, is reacting to the other. And, all of these findings, science is backing it up. They're implying that we are, it sounds trite, but we truly are all connected. We truly are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for anyone who's listening, even for me, I'm like asking this sincerely, what's the simplest way that we can start reconnecting with this kind of awareness? Is there a practice that we can do daily to like actually start tapping into that intuition? Because I think a lot of people are scared of it because they think they're invoking something outside of them. Really, it's just about connecting inward, right?
Exactly. It's all about connecting in. It's you. It's you. Because I come from a Zen Buddhist background, and I have to say meditation, even if you sit 5 minutes a day and follow your breath, because our minds are way too busy and we need to slow them down. And that's the only way, because, meditation, as it's not about relaxing. You don't put music on. That's another way. It's nice, that's kind of relaxing, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about really paying attention. With Zen meditation especially, we don't even close our eyes. You keep them like 1/10 open and looking downward at a 45-degree angle. By the way, when you're looking down sidetrack, when you're looking down 45 degrees, focused on the nose, or even if your eyes are closed, which they're not in Zen meditation, and you're focused here, either way, you're putting pressure. It's an uncomfortable feeling. And the reason is you're putting pressure on the optic nerve, which stimulates the pineal gland, which is the center of, greater awareness, your psychic abilities. That's why when, the more you meditate, the more psychic you do become. I'm putting that in quotation marks because, sometimes that word is demeaned and, it's just made fun of. But anyway, a lack of a better word, I'm using that word. But when you meditate, so you're meditating and just follow your breath and notice the thoughts that come in your mind. That's it. Just notice them. Don't engage, because you'll find after a while, and it took me 6 months. I used to have a mind like lightning. I mean, it still is, but not like before. It took me 6 months of meditating an hour every day to calm my mind and to start to see my thoughts like separate from me. Like you can see them kind of come in your mind, and if you don't engage with them, if you engage with them, then you become them, and all of a sudden, you find yourself in dialogue with, your friend, or thinking about what you're going to make for dinner. But if you don't engage with the thought, it disappears. And it's interesting because every thought that comes in, it wants your attention. It's almost screaming, think me, think me. But if you just keep focused on your breath, because you can't breathe and think at the same time. So a thought comes in, stay on the breath, and that thought will just disappear. And so you become more aware of what you're thinking. So when your mind becomes quieter, sometimes you just might hear something, and it could be, or here's a good example. Like one time, for example, I was painting in the garden, because I was an artist. And all of this, I was house sitting for a dog, and her name was Senda. She was a beautiful German Shepherd. And all of a sudden, in my mind, and this will happen when you start meditating, I heard, take Senda for a walk. And it was not her walk time. And I was painting. I wasn't thinking about the dog. And so I heard that, and I looked up, and there she was standing by the gate. It was her. And so the thought, that's the whole point, is the thought is not different. I mean, it's their thought, but it sounds like your thought. It's not like, but when the thought comes in, it comes in carrying, the expression, a picture tells a million, whatever it is. A picture tells 1,000 words.
I think so, 1,000.
Well, it's true. Every image that comes in, not image, but every thought that you might hear from an animal becomes entwined in images or feelings. You might, I'll give you a really quick example. A dog was urinating in the house, and when I asked him why, all I heard was, I don't want to go back. That's all I heard from this dog. But I saw in my mind a white dog, a flash, white dog, and I felt a lot of grief. So who knows what that means? I don't know. So then you go back to the person and you tell them, and the person fits the puzzle together. And it turns out he was grieving his dog, his little white dog who just left, and he wasn't expressing that to the new dog he got. The new dog who was urinating didn't know about the white dog. So he was feeling like he was doing something wrong. Wow. Like, who's this white dog and why? And he felt the grief. And the person, because he was so annoyed at the dog urinating, kept saying to him, I'm going to take you back to the shelter. And it turns out the shelter, the dog had been placed, rehomed like 7 times. And he was saying, I don't want to go back. He didn't want to go back to the shelter. So the whole point is, when you receive a thought, it might be a feeling that you might receive a feeling. Just acknowledge whatever you're feeling. That's the whole point.
And start meditating.
Yeah, quiet your mind and walk in nature. Just get out of the head. Just get out of the head. Take a hot bath. I get a lot of my insights when I'm taking a shower or sleeping. A lot of inspiration when I'm sleeping.
Great insights for anybody who's listening to actually start putting into practice. In closing, I think you were going to do a card reading for us today.
Oh yeah, let's just do a quick card. Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah, I use these a lot with my clients at the end. I use several decks. I'm going to use my own oracle deck that I created, a Spirit Wisdom Animal Oracle, and this is based on meditation. So just a little group message, like what do we need to know today or this evening if you're 9 hours away. And the cards, they're not, I use them all the time now and I never did. And they're not just pictures on cardboard. They're a tool for you to just connect, and you can get messages that you maybe aren't able to hear without them. They're a tool. Okay, so we're just going to take the top one here. Ooh, rejuvenation, camel. So this basically is about refueling. Let me just read really quickly just the two lines here. Replenishment and play is the recipe for youth, and the restoration. I'm sorry, I can't read.
That's all right.
For the long haul. This is so interesting. This is so kind of goes along with what we're talking about. We work, and think too much. And let's just take a break. Let's remember to restore and relax so that we have more energy for the long haul. Because we're all going to get burned out unless we do. And you're not going to hear your animals when you're, multitasking and doing a million things at once. Or you might hear them, they'll urinate in your house.
And on that note, wow, what a great message.
Yeah.
What a powerful episode, Diane. Thank you so much for being here. This is definitely, I think, when we talk about unmute your intuition, like let's start doing that. Because I think if more people start tapping into that, the world's going to be a better place.
Yeah, unmute it and honor it. And I want to add one thing at closing is that our military, and not just our military, others as well, they take psychic work very seriously, and they train people to become remote viewers. I do remote viewing, but in the military it's used for the wrong reasons. Train people to become psychic spies and to mind travel to other countries and to sit in meetings, to listen, to gather data. They're doing this, and I studied with David Morehouse, who worked as a military, as an agent for I don't know what his title was, but he did this. He was a remote viewer for the military for 20 years, and he quit, and now he teaches the public, and there's a lot of military men and women teaching the public. So the whole point is honor your intuition and take it seriously, because it's your birthright.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you.
This show was brought to you by Project Icon.